Thank you for your flexibility and staying a couple minutes later today during our faculty meeting. It was really important to take the added time to honor and recognize Denise and Diane for their service and support of our students, families, and our staff. So thanks for staying after a little bit later. All right, a couple principal updates. There have been some rumors within Sterling and our cluster about yet again changing bell schedules for next year. As of right now, we will continue with a 20-minute later bell schedule where we would start school at 8:50 and we would end the school day at 3:38. So believe it or not, we are already in the process of planning for next school year. We're working on our student handbook and school supply list. Our student agenda, remember, we're going to print agendas for all kids next year, especially our younger kids will use them frequently. The older they get, the more they will probably use an electronic agenda, but we want to provide that for all of our kids. We have to have our agenda proof to the company prior to spring break in order for them to have it printed for the beginning of the school year. So if you have feedback about our handbook or school supply list, let Juliet, Nick, or I know within the next week. And then I did want to take some time to address student discipline, expectations, and consistency. So we know at every single middle school, we experience challenging behaviors every year, but this seems like a very unique school year. So a quote that I share often with our leadership team is, if you can predict it, you can prevent it. And we know that there are certain things that we can predict as we get into the spring with adolescent children. So we want to really tighten up on some of these areas so we can prevent some negative behaviors from occurring. You know, a week ago, we reduced our 10-minute transition to 5 minutes. Some frequently asked questions around that. So with morning announcements and advisory, why didn't we choose to add 5 minutes to block 1? And there's really 3 reasons. The first reason, our first block is already 20 minutes longer with advisory in there. To add an additional 5 minutes, it would be 25 minutes longer than second block. We just felt like we should divide it up. The second reason is by adding the 5 minutes to second block, that helps our 6th grade teachers that have that first lunch shift get the kids into the classroom, take attendance, and then have time to breathe as they're walking the kids to the cafeteria for lunch. And then really the final reason and the third reason, I had put this out there before it was official. I heard from 34 staff members and the majority said, take the 5 minutes and add it to second block. This is a question that I received not from one of our teachers, but a teacher at another middle school in Loudoun. So he said, kind of around this quote, but like, although fights do occasionally occur, what's different about this year? And what I truly believe is different about this year is more than ever, our kids are pulling out their phones, whether there's a verbal fight, a physical fight. The fight doesn't end in that moment or 30 seconds after the fight. It continues into the evening and for weeks and weeks on social media. Videos are all over the place. It is really, really challenging for our kids because fights just go on and on and on. And although we've had a few cases this year, they've all been isolated incidents. It's so sad because many times the kids will actually be friends. There's a little conflict. They'll end up in one of our offices crying and hugging and apologizing, but the fight doesn't end there because people are putting stuff on social media. So that's what I feel is a little bit different about this year. So if we can predict it, we can prevent it. Something that we can focus on would be cell phones, and just having cell phones off and away during the school day will help with some of these issues. So the book from Todd Whitaker, What Great Teachers Do Differently, in chapter 6, he talks a lot about relationships, expectations, consistency around classroom management and school-wide discipline. I'm not exactly sure where he got this statistic from, but he says 75 to 90% of teachers would see consistency as the area that's their weakness. And I am just as much as fault. I told our leadership team maybe a week ago, like I feel like I'm the big softie. I have not been as consistent as I should be. And what happens is eventually something like cell phones, we look around and everybody has it out because we've been loose on that. We just need to tighten up a little. And I truly believe that the majority of our kids will meet our expectations if we're clear and consistent with our expectations. So another question, I actually have not received this, but you might be thinking about this. Why are you hating on mask breaks? So in a recent email, I mentioned that we, starting on March 15th, mask breaks, you could do a mask break within the building, but to take your kids outside for a little 5, 10, 15-minute recess, we want to cut back on that. And again, like if you can predict it, you can prevent it. We know that if we have these little mini recesses that are occurring all day, they eventually will turn into balls being thrown against windows, other classes being disrupted. And just to be clear, I 100% support instruction that occurs outside. Many of our classrooms in the building do not have windows. I think it's great to get our kids outside. So if I'm looking out my front window and I see band students practicing, or I'm walking on the side of the building and I see a group and they're doing some book clubs or independent reading outside, that is phenomenal. I love that. The two things I would ask is keep your outside to like instruction happening outside. And then the other thing is just let our, whether it's, you know, your dean or your administrative assistant in the house area or outside the house area, an assistant principal or the front office know where your class is at that given time. And again, like I think in an email, I had referenced something that's in our staff handbook giving specific directions on that. All right, a question that I have received is, what are your thoughts? Like, what are you really thinking when students are lined up in the hallway outside of a classroom? This is actually like a good best practice at times to stand at your door and greet students as they're coming in. I always worry about the volume of kids in any given hallway. So if one class in particular has the kids lined up in the hallway, maybe 25 kids, it's completely fine. If 4 classes in that same proximity have 25 kids, now all of a sudden we have 100 kids all bunched up in the hallway. So I am not against lining your kids up and coming in one at a time. I think it's just some coordinating with your colleagues and classrooms around you to make sure that there's at least an adult presence when we have all these kids grouped at the same time in the hallway. A question, are we allowed to have students pack up before the bell? So it is a best practice to have the teacher or staff member dismiss students and not the bell. What we want to try to avoid is the bell goes off and there's this instant panic and a sense of urgency to rush out into the hallways for dismissal, or you're headed to your next class. So it's just a good practice to be calm, slowly release kids versus this just like intense panic that we need to get to that next location. So what's the big deal about bringing students early to lunch? Our cafeteria staff of 5, they prepare 1,200 lunches every single day, and they need adequate prep time in between the shifts. So they have asked if we can tighten up on when our students are coming into the kitchen to pick up their lunch. Also, there's a supervision issue. There's a couple blocks where we have like a dean and a counselor that are in the house area supervising that, and they can't be in the house area watching kids while also being at the cafeteria. So just tighten up on your times there. 1 or 2 minutes is not a big deal, but I would say like we've kind of gotten into that point where classes are coming 8, 9, 10 minutes before they're supposed to, and we're just not ready. So if we can tighten up on that, that would be really helpful. And then I've mentioned this a couple times, and I've received this question, like, in all honesty, do you really believe adult supervision is a strength in our school? And I would say 100% yes. So whether I'm in the hallways, whether I have a visitor and we're just touring the school, the feedback that I get all the time, and I'm actually seeing, is there's adults everywhere. So every class change, there are adults all over this building. We always have to be aware of some hot spots. There could be a sub that isn't in the right position, or even some blind spots. Like, we know that the hallway between house B and house C, it's a long stretch, and there's really only 1 classroom, maybe 2 in there, or even outside of the H hallway where the gyms are. There's just some areas that we need to tighten up on a little bit, but in general, there are adults everywhere. Every single incident that we've had this year, there's been adults right there, like literally right there. that have helped kind of prevent something from becoming even bigger than occurred. So this question has come up. So should we change our dismissal procedures? We know at the end of the day, when the bell rings, we have 1,200 kids all rushing out of the building. So we are going to try something new starting tomorrow. And we've tried this before and we've had some success with it. Our 7th and 8th graders will continue to walk out that main hallway. But our 6th graders, we're going to filter them through the H hallway and then up through the music end, like by the cafeteria main office, just to divide our kids up a little bit. It is hard, something different this year that we haven't had in previous years. Every single day, we have about 5 or 6 buses that are double runs. So that means that we have close to 100 kids just standing out front waiting for that bus to come. And our 6th graders are getting up there and there's just so many people and they're trying to push through the mob of 7th and 8th graders. So by bringing them up that other hallway, we think that it will help with our dismissal procedures. And then this question, so what advice would you give as we head into the spring? And again, this came from another teacher from a different middle school who is just really like almost shocked by the level of behavior of kids this year. So the advice that I gave her was focus on the positive. You know, most of our kids will meet expectations. Most of our kids are doing what we expect and they're doing the right thing. Yes, there's a small percentage of kids that are making some poor choices, but if we only focus on those negative things, it would easily bring us down. We know that middle school kids will make mistakes, and part of middle school is all about training and helping kids grow and learn through these challenging years. And then the final thing I want to leave you with, again, I just want to say a big thanks for staying after for a couple minutes to honor Diane and Denise. But this is a quote. I'm reading a book right now and I came upon this quote and I was like, this is perfect. Like this speaks to exactly how I'm feeling right now. And the quote says, we control the culture in our school based on what we create and what we allow. So if we allow kids to be disrespectful, if we allow kids to use inappropriate language and carry their devices around and pull them out and film people, and the bullying that occurs at every school, if we allow that, we're going to create that negative culture. Or we can focus on the positive. We can set clear and consistent expectations. And when students mess up, yes, there are consequences for their behavior. But in general, we have an amazing staff, great kids. I'm excited about this spring. And so this is just a reminder, be consistent. Hold your colleagues accountable, hold me as your principal accountable. And again, we will continue to create this dynamic environment at Riverbend. So again, thanks for watching this video and staying after a little bit later during our faculty meeting. Have a great day.